Okay, let's officially get started. Welcome everyone. My name is Megan Maxwell. I'm the CEO from Food Core Nutrition Services. Thank you for joining us today. We're really excited to bring the school food webinar to you. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land, and where I am in East Perth, that's the Whadjuk Noongar people, and I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging here, but also on the lands where you're joining us from. We have people from Metro Perth, regional Perth, as well as other states and territories, so welcome. As many of you know, the inaugural School Food Summit was held in Tasmania in May this year. It was one of the most inspiring and thought-provoking events that I've been to in a really long time. When I came home, I had pages and pages of notes from all the different presentations that we saw. A huge thanks to School Food Matters in Tasmania and FOCIS, our national body. They were the people who came up with the idea. They approached speakers, they coordinated the whole event, and it was just incredible. From the diversity of the speakers in the room, the networking opportunities throughout the day, the most fantastic meal from a food truck that is part of the Tasmanian food landscape was just incredible. When we returned to WA and met with Jenny at Foodbank and Catherine from Eon, we said, let's do something more. Let's keep the conversation going. Let's bring a taste of that event to WA. And it's so great having this online because it does mean that our colleagues in other states and territories can join as well. So today's webinar is about sharing our presentations that we did in Tasmania, as well as sharing some of the key learnings from the day. And I know many of you joining us today represent organisations across WA that support schools in a range of different programs and resources and amazing initiatives. And I really thank and commend the work that you're doing. During the presentation, please feel free to use the chat function. We have disabled your mics. There won't really be time for questions other than putting it in the chat. The presenters will do their best to respond to you in the chat so everyone can see those answers. If we don't quite get to that, then we'll take those questions offline and reply. We are recording today's session as well. There were a few people who couldn't make it, so that will be available as well. Let's get started and I will hand over to Jenny from Foodbank. Thanks, Jenny.
Thanks, Megan. Hi, everyone. I will just get my presentation up and also acknowledge and pay my respects to the Whadjuk Noongar people. And it's on their lands here. And I'm in Duncraig and I would like to pay my respects to them. So let me just bring that up. Okay, hopefully everyone can see that. Megan, is that all up? Yep, okay, awesome. So, hi everyone. For those that don't know me, my name is Jenny Tartaglia. I'm the Head of Nutrition Education at Foodbank WA. My background is in public health, nutrition and health promotion. I lead a team of 12 people, including public health nutritionists and program administration staff. We deliver nutrition education and cooking programs under our brand NOM, and our team is responsible for the delivery of the school breakfast program, which is led by Miranda Chester. Today, I will be talking about Foodbank WA's school breakfast program. And this was the presentation that I did at the School Food Summit, which was absolutely, as Megan said, inspiring. So many wonderful people in the room, so passionate about feeding children in schools. So it was wonderful to be able to be part of that day and then also to be able to share our presentations here today with you all. So just very briefly about Foodbank. Foodbank WA supports people who are food insecure by rescuing and sourcing food and groceries across the food chain from farmers, manufacturers, retailers, and we distribute them to frontline charities across Western Australia to provide to individuals and families in need. But today my presentation will be just talking about the school breakfast program. So the program commenced in 2001 with just 17 schools. By the end of last year, we had 562 schools that were engaged in the program. The program membership has rapidly increased in 2026, thanks to the WA government's recent investment in the expansion of the school breakfast program. As at today, we have 689 schools and education sites that have been engaged with the program. the eligibility for schools to be part of the program, it's really specifically targeting low socioeconomic schools. And any school that is beyond what's classified as low socioeconomic is welcome to apply based on any demonstrated need of any particular students that may be at risk of food insecurity or otherwise at educational risk. So this slide really demonstrates the reach of the program. Our role is really to provide the high volume procurement and storage of shelf-stable foods. And we facilitate the access to foods based on school demand, the delivery of the product to outlying regional schools beyond food banks, branch and network, and we also provide advice, support and resources for schools. So last year we celebrated 25 years of providing schools food for their breakfast programs, and this just shows a snapshot of last year of how many students were involved, the distance travelled to take that food out to those schools, and how many kilos of food that we provided, which was over 342,000 kilos. So the scope of this program is huge, as you can see. The map on the right shows all the little dots, every location or every school that has a school breakfast program, and then the orange markers on there show the branches that Food Bank has. And we really have two models where schools can obtain food through the breakfast program. 60% of schools registered for the program visit a branch to access their supplies, and they do that through ordering online the shelf-stable and shelf-stable items. Then the schools will go into the branch and pick up that order. The other 40% of schools are supplied with a quarterly order, and they're what we call a remote supply. And the schools beyond the reasonable distance of a food bank branch, we will organise through freight companies. We send that food out each quarter, and that stock will last them for hopefully a whole term. The amount of food that the school orders is really up to the school and how much quantity that they determine. And the funding that we receive is really covering freight costs between food bank branches and schools, and also it covers the cost of the food. So the food that we provide are 7 breakfast products to registered schools free of charge, and these stable items are available to all schools. Wheat biscuits, oats, canned fruit, Vegemite, canned spaghetti, baked beans and UHT milk. We do provide some fresh food, including bread, fruit and vegetables and yogurt, and that's available to any of the schools that can access a branch, a food bank branch, and they're also subject to availability. And another initiative that we have is a school fruit van. So this isn't part of the program, but I felt it was important to just touch on this, as this is something that we've expanded on this year. So this is where we deliver 10 kilos of fresh fruit per week to metropolitan schools, and this has been expanded to 125 schools this year. So this is a map of WA, and it shows the vast geography presenting a real challenge for transportation of this program for even shelf-stable food. So the climate, the extremes, the wet season, flooding in the northwest, really sometimes where roads are unsuitable or they're blocked, this creates a lot of challenges for the transport of heavy freight. So in this example here, you'll see how we get food into the community of Columbaroo, which is WA's most northern school, and we can't actually go in through roads. So the trucks go through from Perth, they go through Halls Creek, out of the state, up to Darwin, And through an amazing partnership we had with the Shorelines shipping company, they barge the food into that community, and so that it's travelling over 4,000 kilometres to get that food into that community, which is amazing. And the little visual on the right is something we put together because originally this presentation was done in Hobart. I wanted to provide some visual of how big WA actually is compared to Tasmania. And it was a little bit controversial, this visual, we could say, because obviously everybody has their own challenges. I wasn't minimising at all the challenges that schools have in Tasmania, but for some, you know, it really shows that each area, each location has its own challenges, but for WA, definitely the vast geography does present a challenge. I'll just show a little clip, which is one of our very remote schools, and it just shows, I really like this, it's very short, but it shows the breakfast program food arriving in that community and the excitement that brings. This school is in the Tanami Desert, which is in the northeast area of WA, and hopefully the tech will work. So that was the school sent us that little clip, but you'll see that food arrives on a pallet, and they're 600 kilo pallets. So, you know, every school breakfast program runs differently, and you'll see that one, the kids are sitting in a little outdoor area. There's community dogs walking through it, or they're sitting outside. So the schools are really responsible on the ground for the format to run the program, what suits them best. But we do observe two sort of distinct models of implementation. More of a formal breakfast club is one, and the other one is more of an ad needs provision. So formal breakfast clubs are typically open to all students, and they run on either a set day per week, and they can occur anywhere between 1 and 5 days per week. We really encourage universal access, where there's really no we try and, you know, for schools, they're really trying to reduce the stigma by attending the breakfast club and making it open for everybody. And this quite often includes families with other siblings coming along to also enjoy breakfast. And this also caters to students experiencing need that's not specifically food related. We know breakfast clubs foster relationships between students and staff and breaks down barriers and provides a safe space for students. In terms of providing food or breakfast in an informal or as needs basis, this is where schools will hold supplies of the food on site, and they provide that as needed for the students that might come to school without any breakfast or sometimes without any food. This is sometimes more popular in smaller schools or schools that experience low or intermittent demand. And it also can be in place on days where formal breakfast clubs are not provided. So because every school runs the program to suit their unique needs, the benefits and impacts of the school breakfast program are really uniquely to each school. And program evaluation across the years has demonstrated that there's really a strong evidence that the school breakfast program is highly valued and is meeting the needs of schools in alleviating hunger. We know the program positively impacts students' capacity for learning across 3 domains, which includes schooling, personal and social capability, and school environmental factors. Schools really report a clear link between social, emotional learning opportunities afforded by the children attending the school breakfast program and increased eagerness to attend school and provide improved punctuality and greater readiness for learning. So some research that was conducted here through ECU really suggested, it was talking about all the different models of school breakfast programs, but the impacts of the school breakfast programs on schools and students is really akin to being a stone being dropped in water. So that creates both depth and breadth of effect. At the point of impact, we know that a structured, consistent breakfast really addresses children's immediate nutritional needs. But also, it's not just about giving them nutrition. We know that it supports their calmness, emotional security, and readiness to learn. And then these benefits ripple outwards and enhancing peer relationships, classroom climate, staff wellbeing, and the broader functioning of the school community. So the outcomes of the Breakfast Club really go beyond nutrition, and the three key areas were improved readiness for learning in the classroom and really engaging students and strengthening social connections and school belonging, and the broader positive effects on the school climate really, show the smoother transition from classroom, children being more settled. This research is actually on our website if anybody would like to look further at that publication. So I'll leave you with this quote from a principal at a remote community school, which really provides insight into the value of the school breakfast program. And I'll read it out. The principal says, each morning we arrive at school to teach our students the lessons we have carefully prepared, hoping our students come to school bright-eyed and ready to learn. But for most students out here, that just isn't the case. Although some of the reasons students might be unprepared are beyond our control, there is something we can do. We can encourage students to eat breakfast at school and help make sure that no student walks through the door with an empty stomach. So on that, I will conclude my presentation. Thank you, everybody. And I will now pass over to Catherine from Eon Foundation.
Thanks, Jenny. I've seen that again several times, and I'm just amazed by your program every time. And I'm so pleased to be here today to share a little taste of Tasmania with you all. It was such a fantastic inaugural event, and I'm really encouraged by the growing national collaboration to improve food systems. I have the privilege of working on Wajak Noongar Budja, but also across many remote Aboriginal communities throughout Australia. And every day I'm inspired by First Nations people, their enduring connection to country, and the knowledge they hold about food, land, and community. I'm Catherine Taylor, the CEO of Eon Aboriginal Foundation. As a Wajala, a white fella, I'm guided by an Aboriginal board and by the many First Nations staff and communities that we partner with. I've tried to bring some of their voices into this presentation because we work in some of the most remote places in Australia, and community perspectives underpin absolutely everything that we do. Community voices shape the co-design and co-delivery of our program, including decisions about local school food models. I won't have time to unpack that today, but I want to acknowledge that that sits beneath everything I'm talking about. So what happens when there is no canteen or even a supermarket? Because that's the reality in so many remote Aboriginal communities. Families face enormous barriers. These images all come from this year. We had flooding cutting off communities, as is common during the wet season, though there was particularly significant flooding in the Big Rivers region in the Northern Territory. Fresh food is expensive, often poor quality, and like Jenny described, incredibly difficult to access. Even travelling to a large supermarket can mean paying for fuel that many families simply cannot afford. Schools often provide meals during term, but there is a gap during school holidays, particularly over the long 6-week summer break. And even during term, there can be very little agency. Children may be fed, but they aren't necessarily learning the skills or developing the connection to food that creates lifelong change. Food insecurity isn't occasional, it's structural. Most school food programs focus on access, and that matters, absolutely, but access alone isn't enough. If food isn't affordable and people don't have the skills, confidence, and agency to grow it, cook it, and choose it, the impact is limited. In remote Aboriginal communities, we're seeing some of the highest rates of preventable nutrition-related disease anywhere in the world, including type 2 diabetes, kidney disease, and malnutrition. Poor nutrition affects everything: how children learn, how they concentrate, how they regulate emotions, how they grow, and ultimately the opportunities they have throughout life. And that's where our program comes in. For more than 20 years, Eon Aboriginal Foundation has worked alongside communities across the top end, the Kimberley, Central Australia and the Midwest, supporting practical nutrition education, food growing and community-led solutions that create lasting change. Just a little bit about our model. Our program is community initiated, so communities invite Eon in. Then we spend around a year building relationships, undertaking due diligence, and agreeing roles and responsibility before signing a 3-way partnership between community leadership, or whatever community governance looks like in that place, the school and Eon. We employ project managers who live locally and train community assistants, building local capability so the program continues well into the future. Every fortnight, every student participates in hands-on gardening, nutrition and cooking classes alongside workshops with community members. We typically work alongside each community for a minimum of 5 years before gradually stepping back. The garden is not the outcome, it's just the mechanism. It connects curriculum, access to healthy food, practical life skills and positive food messaging. Children own the garden. They're proud of what they've grown. They have a tangible connection to the food they're cooking, making them much more willing to taste new foods and experiment. Repeating recipe means children don't simply follow instructions, they develop practical skills they'll return to throughout their lives. Our program is multidimensional, contributing across all 6 domains and multiple pillars of the National Strategy for Food Security in remote Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities. And importantly, it doesn't replace other food security or school food initiatives. Like the breakfast program, it links them, it complements them, it strengthens them. And when we think about food security, we think about 3 things: access, so fresh food grown locally, we pickle and preserve, and we have community-owned gardens where everyone can harvest. Affordability, free fruit and vegetables, supplementing meals, reducing reliance on community stores, and really importantly, agency, so practical skills in cooking, gardening and healthy eating, confidence, local leadership, because access without affordability or affordability without agency isn't enough. By growing food, cooking it, eating it, and learning about nutrition, children experience agency. I wanted to share a quick example of agency in action from one of our gardens in Central Australia. They thought they'd picked the watermelon too early, so the pure joy when they realised it was perfectly ripe inside. I think that's agency. And here's another example: connection to food, joy, curiosity, confidence, and skills. Capability building is one of the most important parts of our work. Healthy school food programs rely on people. We work alongside the people who prepare food, teach children, and support healthy eating every day, because they're embedding nutrition through curriculum. They answer questions, they build confidence, they become champions within their own communities. Jennifer, one of our school nutrition staff, is a wonderful example of what this looks like in practice. I still find that shocking every time I hear it. As Chase says, we're trying to stop kids passing too early in life, and that's why this work matters. So we don't run the school lunch programs, we strengthen them so that they're more nutritious, locally relevant, and sustainable. Every program is built around that three-way partnership, and each partner has a clearly defined role. It's in the overlap where the real work happens. It's shared responsibility, community ownership, local leadership, and our approach is family health promotion and community development, using schools as the anchor point. That creates opportunities to align food access, education, employment, and health services around existing community strengths. Real change obviously takes time, and it requires trust, consistency, people on the ground, and that's why we typically work alongside communities for at least the 5 years. So our goal is really local capability, and when eventually Eon steps back, the knowledge, leadership, and confidence remain. I'll give you a really quick example. At Rangeway Primary School, our project manager has recently been invited to begin working in the kindergarten as well, because parents are there too. It's creating another opportunity to engage families early. We take home produce and recipes that extend learning well beyond the school gate. This is really prevention in practice, but prevention requires long-term thinking, and it must be embedded in school systems, community systems, and everyday life. So we see better food, daily exposure, practical skills, community ownership, and children aren't simply receiving food, they're learning how food works, they're building habits they carry into adulthood, and it's not short-term intervention, it's generational reform. We've recently got back the results from independent research organisation Third Story and Think Culture from our 25-26 evaluation, and can demonstrate impact across our 3 impact measurement framework domains: long, healthy lives, strong communities, and healthy food economies, all underpinned by strong country and culture. And most importantly, communities own these gardens. They harvest from them, they share produce with families and elders, and they strengthen local food security. I'll show this in action. And I'll just leave you with produce from Bladderwich. This is about 450 kilometres northeast of Alice Springs, and it's only 18 months after the program began, and all this food is going out to community because they've already used a whole heap of the cooking classes within the school. And this represents far more than fruit and vegetables to me. It represents what food security looks like when communities have access, affordability, and agency. Thank you. I'll hand over to Julie.
Actually, you're handing back to me, Catherine.
Sorry.
It's Megan.
Back to you,
That's
Megan.
okay. I will share my screen. I just love, that's the second time I've seen Jenny and Catherine's presentation. And yes, I was smiling, and yes, I was nodding. And just those images are incredible. Thank you so much for sharing. So my presentation from Tasmania looked at canteens, and I took the approach that let's step back in history and see where canteens started and where we're at now. I am a public health nutritionist. I'm also a mum of a 5-year-old, which means I'm very new to my lunchbox journey, and I'm also a canteen volunteer. Food Corps is a not-for-profit organisation, and we were established in 1994. We are also inaugural members of FOCIS. We've been involved with FOCIS, our national body, from the beginning. And Foodbank and Eon are also members of FOCIS, which means we're really having these amazing conversations at a national level. Think about the last time you ever made spaghetti bolognese, at home or at work, and then think about some of these questions. Have you ever had to consider dietary requirements when you were making that spaghetti bolognese and made some changes accordingly? Were you catering for vegetarians, or did you have dietary requirements and you needed to make a gluten-free version? Have you ever made more than 30 serves of that spaghetti bolognese? My dinner table certainly doesn't have 30 people at it, but creating 30 serves is huge. Have you ever costed that recipe and then applied a markup? So by costing, it means if you were at home, you may have done your food budget for the week, and spaghetti bolognese fits in that. But if you're then going to sell it, you need to know what that markup's going to be to ensure you cover your costs. And then have you ever had to also market that meal? So you need to assess the nutritional value, follow food safety procedures, all while supervising a bunch of volunteers that you maybe haven't met before. This is what we expect of our canteen staff, and I really commend the work that they do. I have looked at many canteen operations over my nearly 20 years at Food Corps and volunteered in a number of them, and the way they operate and the way that they can churn out this food consistently that the students enjoy and is cost effective is just incredible. If we take a few steps back, in 1940, the Oslo lunch was introduced in Australia, and this was really a post-World War II initiative because there was malnourishment. It was 3 slices of wholemeal bread, a good amount of butter, cheese, salad, milk, and an apple or other fruit that was available. It was cheap, which is roughly sixpence was roughly worth about $1.30 to $1.50 in Australian terms today. That's super cheap. If I'm looking at a canteen menu now, I'm seeing maybe a cheesy, which is half a bread roll with some cheese grilled on top that you could get in that price range. You certainly wouldn't be getting a nutritious meal that included a number of food groups. And this quote, we were deeply concerned about malnutrition. We were interested in the experiment, which is the Oslo experiment. Neither the council, education department, nor the sustenance department seemed to consider it their function. And we still have some of those conversations today across our different sectors. In 1946, that was the first version of a school canteen guidelines and an operation manual. From the 1950 to 70, we had the Commonwealth Government Free Milk Scheme. I was not at school at that time, but I'm told that people still have a visceral reaction to the milk because many schools didn't have refrigeration. So that milk sat out for a long time. So it was no longer very palatable. This is a canteen menu from the 70s. And whilst it's pretty standard in terms of the offerings, the main thing that I wanted to draw your attention to is down the bottom. So it's a recipe used in our cafeteria requested by mothers. And we see these comments all the time, either on social media or in the canteens that we speak to, that children are trying different food from the canteen that they might not have had at home, or they're saying that the way that the canteen supervisor creates it is so delicious, can we make it at home? And this is as age as a process that we're still seeing today. We know that there's a lot of nostalgia around school canteens. Whenever something is raised on social media or in the news, it generally gets a lot of buy-in, and people talk about what they used to be having for lunch. This particular post had 209 comments. And I don't know about you, but our Food Corps posts don't get 209 comments. Lots of media coverage whenever canteens come up. This was part of a national campaign run by the Federation of Canteens in Schools, so FOCIS, our national group, and it was across the country. We saw lots of different take-up of different messages around school canteens and trying to make sure that canteens survive. We know that there's around 9,500 schools in Australia. We know that there's 4.1 million children enrolled, but we don't know how many have a canteen or a food service. Our best guess is around 75%, and this is data that Food Corps has, as well as talking to some of my other colleagues in other states and territories. Thankfully, we do have a master's student, 2 master's students with us at the moment creating some mapping in WA. So we are going to have more of a picture, but we actually don't know how many schools have a canteen. A standard model includes usually a paid canteen manager or a supervisor supported by part-time, casual or volunteer staff. With the exception of Tasmania, most often they're managed by a parent body. Order is placed at the beginning of the day. Food is served from the canteen. However, the days of operation vary greatly. Number of students that use the canteen fluctuates. It's a captive market. So if you had a cafe in a shop, then you might have any number of the general public that are going to walk past. That's not the case in our schools. Menus may have 10 choices or they may have over 100 choices, which is huge. And there's a balance between commercial and canteen-made items. However, a more traditional model, a more modern day model, is that traditional model plus we have policies and guidelines across the country. We have limited and declining volunteers, an increasing trend of outsourced canteens. Most canteens have online ordering. So even from a Food Corps membership survey in 2023, we had 69% of schools were using online ordering, and just in 3 years, that's gone up to 90%. Less cash, more FPOS, and competing and complementary food. So many schools have different ways of providing food within their school environment. Uber Eats right down the bottom is a new phenomenon, and many education departments have some policies and guidelines around how to manage that. Key challenges include staffing. We have many canteen staff that do a lot of hours for love. Volunteer recruitment and retention is an issue. Financial viability is variable. So supplier costs in the last 2 years have increased, but we haven't been able to increase our prices in canteens to match that. In 2023, we know that canteens in WA, around 66% made a profit, and that declined to about 50% in 2026. The food supply chain has changed. There's that real balance between commercial items and freshly made. And when I was explaining this to some students the other day, when your volunteers don't arrive and they're the ones who are supposed to be helping you make things from scratch, you need things that you can either have that you've bulk prepared and they're in the freezer and you can just pop straight into the oven to heat up, or you need those commercially prepared foods. That's not to say that we don't want more items made from scratch. It's just balancing the manpower to be able to do that. Canteen volunteers is something that is also always schools are always calling out for. This was just this post was on social media just from April, and it's got 83 comments. And when you read through those comments, there's a great variety of issues, but ultimately, the main theme that goes through those comments is that everybody in canteens is struggling for volunteers. We have wastage issues. We have government policy and guidelines, compliance and support that varies across the country. Student preferences and catering for dietary requirements can be tricky, and inadequate infrastructure. If you think about a really great restaurant that you go to, if you happen to see the kitchen, you'll see amazing equipment and the layout really works. You go into some of our canteens and they look little more than a domestic kitchen. That is changing, and we can see that investment in things like stainless steel benches and commercial grade equipment is really going to make an impact in the type of food that's prepared. But the volume that we would prepare on average in canteens might be around 300 covers per day, whereas in a busy restaurant that's only open for dinner, you're only doing 100, yet they are equipped really, really well for it. So if it's so hard, why do we keep doing it? There's lots of reasons. So we can promote nutritious food to build lifelong habits. We're increasing access to food in schools, building food selection skills. Often when children are buying from the canteen, it's the first time that outside of their home, they've had the opportunity to choose something and that purchasing process. We can reinforce nutrition information learned in the classroom, and that's that whole school approach where the canteen is an integral part of that. Support school community and culture. When you talk to canteen volunteers, they usually keep coming back because it's fun. They like being in there. It's that sense of community. They're helping out in their school, but they're building friendships and relationships within that environment. Model safe food handling practices. It helps parents and families not having to pack a lunchbox every single day, but you've got capacity to buy something from the canteen is helpful to parents. Job opportunities and job pathways. We held our general meeting down in Bunbury earlier this year, and the canteen manager there is incredible, and she has a number of volunteers with special needs that come in, and the skills that some of them are learning means that they can get paid jobs once they've learnt those skills and built their confidence in a safe environment. And fundraising for the school, which is controversial sometimes. The canteen shouldn't be there to make oodles of money. It should be there to provide a service, a learning environment, and cover their costs. But we know that that's not always the case. And some schools really do use that as their fundraiser. So if that canteen doesn't make enough money or it closes, the P&C or the school need to find other fundraising pathways. So how do they thrive? Number one, mapping the school environment. Cross-sector planning, and cost-effective and sustainable practices. When I'm talking about mapping, there is currently no systematic data on school food environments. Some organisations and government departments have done some mapping. Sometimes there's summary reports available, sometimes that is kept confidential. So the solution is to undertake that systematic mapping of school food environments. And it's not just the canteen, but how is all food being provided? Do you have a school breakfast program? Do schools have a garden? How are they providing lunches when a child arrives at school with no lunchbox? We can learn from Australian and international experiences around that mapping, create a direction to inform policy planning and targeted action, identify geographic and systematic inequalities, utilise existing school reporting, and expand existing systems like the Australian Food Atlas. I mentioned we've got some master's students who are already doing an incredible job doing this, commencing this work for us in WA, and I thank my South Australian colleagues for sharing their protocols about how they did this as well. Cross-sector planning and workforce. So we have underpaid, unstable and underappreciated canteen staff and different policies and guidelines across Australia. We need to invest in our canteen staff. If we had minimum training requirements and ongoing PD that they are paid to attend, and free things like networking and webinars so that we're sharing success stories and challenges. Sometimes we do something and it doesn't work, but we can still learn from that. Establish and strengthen cross-sector partnerships, investment in a dedicated school food and nutrition workforce, and increasing policy alignment and how we talk about food. We have increasing and varying costs, so how do we manage that at a canteen level? We need to support canteens to implement best practice business and financial management practices, including reducing the number of items on the menu. It is much easier to cost and prepare less items and have weekly specials or changing with the seasons rather than having hundreds of items on the menu at one time. So simplify menus, increase local procurement and seasonal produce, invest in equipment and infrastructure. And we've just had a massive investment in WA. The Department of Education has had canteen grants that have awarded 97 schools so far, with the opportunity to create a better food system within the canteen through equipment. There is further investment still to come. We need to leverage canteens to co-design and pilot school meal programs and consider the different models for how that could be operated. Ensuring canteens are an integral part of the school system and another learning environment. They're not just there to provide food, it's a way that we can teach our kids about where food comes from, nutrition, food selection skills, handling money, food safety, and increasing equity and access so we can work towards ensuring all students have access to at least one nutritious meal at school each day. I do have some references to share, but I also wanted to touch on a couple of things from the summit and my learnings. So when I came back to the office, I looked at all my notes and I've pulled together just a couple of things that I thought were really crucial to share. We all talk about cross-sector collaborations, and when we think about food in schools, it's a no-brainer to consider the Department of Education and the Department of Health. But what was really clear at the summit in Tasmania is including each of those other departments, as well as our NGOs, as well as our schools. And I've got quotes throughout this from different people who presented, and Julie said it's a shared investment in our future. Australian data would be good, but right now global learnings and evidence exist. So Bet Golly says we've got some evidence that we can already start working towards. Leah Galvin talked about procurement and prioritising local food procurement. Julie said that people in Tasmania feel proud to use their local produce. Andrew Hillier talked about food has to move well. So from farms to storage and preparation to delivery. Teachers are change agents in our schools. What do our teachers do? Is that static happening? Okay. Parents are supportive of school meals. So the research is already showing that the majority are willing to pay and contribute. And that was from Alex in South Australia. Catherine Kent spoke about parents as well. We've got 82% of food insecure families strongly support school meals compared to 61% of food secure families. However, both, their preference is for a fully government funded option. Public opinion needs to be supportive to generate public will from Danielle Golagos. Liesl Spencer had a really interesting approach to talking about food in schools, and she says that universal free access for all children. This should be the norm. This is about public good. And last, Erica Reeve spoke about utilising the evidence about food security, education outcomes, and promoting community wellbeing. And that's just a snapshot and some of the people that I found really inspiring on the day. And the last person that I find very inspiring is Julie, and I'm going to hand over to Julie now to speak. Julie Dunbabbin is the founder and ambassador of the School Lunch Program in Tasmania, and she provided the keynote presentation in Tasmania. And when I rang her and said, could you please reduce your presentation, which was amazing, at 45 minutes and whip it together for 15 minutes, she said yes. So it's my pleasure to introduce Julie.
Thanks very much, Megan. Can everyone hear me? Great. I'm actually obviously coming from Hobart in Tasmania, and the traditional Aboriginal name for the area where Hobart sits is Nipaluna, and it's a name from the revived Palawakani language representing the country of the traditional Muinani people. So I will share with you my presentation, and it's really great to see so many of you here today, so thank you very much. Now, let me see how I go. Hopefully I've got the, yep. So I just need to start it from the beginning, sorry. In my practice, I did this very quickly, but it's obviously not. Here we go. Can everyone see that? Hopefully you can. Yeah, great. I've been talking for the last 4 or 5 years about the need for a school lunch program that impacts positively on school learning, health and wellbeing. But my background, I just wanted to very quickly share with you where I've come from. I was born in Ballarat, but my primary school years were actually in England. My parents were working in Ballarat on a work visa. So I have great experience of the school lunch program in England before Jamie Oliver came in and really lifted it to even better. But I have fond memories of eating quite a stodgy lunch in the cold in England. I'm a home ec teacher. I've been a canteen manager. I've been the EO of the Tasmanian School Canteen Association, which is now known as School Food Matters. And then I was able to move into the manager role for the school lunch program in 2021. And so really my whole life has been focused on working with children and food. I'm now retired, but I'm still very much involved with the amazing work that goes on in each state and territory of our country. And one of the calls for action from the meeting in May in Hobart was that we actually solidify a national alliance around school meals. And I'll talk about the great work that canteens currently do and will always do, but looking at maybe a slight a shift. So, why are we having to address this? I mean, really, we live in an amazing country that grows fantastic produce. We're a wealthy country, but we're one of, I think it's now 4 out of 38 OECD countries that don't have a school lunch program. So there's school lunch programs everywhere, but just not here, not in Australia. We've got very high health costs, yet we spend a very small percentage on preventative health. We've got a growing case of food insecurity in our country. We know there's a reduced consumption of the 5 food groups. We know that because we know that roughly 48% of grown-ups, so it's actually probably more for children, are accessing their daily energy needs from highly processed food. So that usually obviously correlates with the poor nutritional content. So it's not coming from the 5 food groups. We're seeing more and more that children are becoming very mono in their range of foods that they're eating, and they tend to be the white, brown foods. And we've also got growing evidence of poor gut biome. So, and obviously that's linked to mental health and therefore a body's robustness, but also that ability to learn as best as we want to learn, both as adults and children. We know that we've got a poor uptake of vegetable consumption with young people. In fact, 94% don't eat the dietary required amounts that are suggested to consume. We also know that our food system is now becoming heavily based on export and on a profit-making basis. So it is about, selling food that is often highly processed, rather than looking at how we promote the sale of the foods from the 5 food groups. And as has been mentioned already by Megan, we have got a school food delivery model that is actually a flawed business model because it's not really sustainable when we're relying heavily on volunteers, and that needs to be shifted, I think, at that government level so that people are paid, people are valued in the role of feeding our children well. There's whole range of meals that are consumed by young people whilst at school. We're all part of this, delivery of food. And Megan's already talked about the need for planning what is being consumed at school. So school food plans, which is something I saw in action when I went on my Churchill Fellowship in 2019. The evidence of school food plans were in some of those countries that I visited. So it did give that whole school approach to delivery of food and who is doing what. Because quite often the leadership group in some schools don't know that the librarian is bringing in fruit every week for a fruit bowl, or that the kindergarten teacher has a muesli bar, a stack of muesli bars in their top drawer just in case they're needed for a meltdown from a little one. There's increasingly school staff are being asked to address the need to feed children whilst at school without a true strategy to do so. And that's where those school food plans would come into great purpose, I think, in helping that strategy to be delivered. But of course, as we know and what Jen talked about in her presentation, there's an absolute need for breakfast programs, and not and often, not always, obviously, from the work Jen's doing with Food Bank and what happens in our state and what happens in other states and territories, but a lot of schools do this off the side of their desk. It's not in a planned way. They are having to source food every week, so it's not programmed, and there's a lot of time taken to go and collect the food from Food Bank, for example, or go and do a shop and the cost of that shop. So there's an increasing need, and I know when I started off in the canteen space, a lot of principals would say to me, "It's not my job to feed children, Julie, it's my job to educate them." And always my response was, they are not going to be able to learn if they don't have good food in their tummy. And that's still the case. So the role of the canteen in schools is absolutely vital. It does provide nutritious food to support student learning, health and well-being and development, and trying to address that risk of childhood obesity. It functions as an educational tool to reinforce healthy eating habits, and Megan talked about that whole school approach to eating well, and so the canteen is part of that. It's a crucial and affordable service to busy families, but it can't provide to all families because some families can't afford that service. But my question is it ready for a change? And I ask this question because of this. In my time as working in school canteens and supporting school canteens, the chicken nugget definitely reigns supreme, and all the beautiful meals that canteen managers prepare, if often what I witnessed was that if the chicken nugget was on the menu, and of course the chicken nugget meets the requirements of the dietary guidelines, often that is where children go because they know what they're going to get. So it was the chicken nugget that made me apply for the Churchill Fellowship to see how other countries around the world were actually feeding their children whilst at school. So why the need to focus on school lunch? I mean, we also need to focus on breakfast and recess, etc. But for us here in Tassie, where we've started from is that, feeding children well is actually an investment in the children and in society, and that's certainly the line that I've pushed, and School Food Matters with Kirsty and Kate continue to push as the reason for the investment in providing food for children. And I've already mentioned that many countries around the world invest in the education of their children by providing a school lunch program for all children. So it's a universal approach. I should acknowledge at this point too that it's not just myself that has done this. I suppose I came back with an idea, and there's been a huge team at School Food Matters, but also Loaves and Fishes Tasmania, who are another NGO that we've worked together along with our state government, also the Menzies Institute for Medical Research, and we're now working obviously with Flinders University, but also it's our farmers and our producers, and it's the parents, and really it's the children. It's the children that are continuously giving us feedback, wanting to eat the food. It's an exciting part of their day. So it's a very big team effort. I just came along with the idea from my Churchill. But these are the key success factors that I did see on my travels. So it was all students eating a school prepared lunch, not just some. It was sitting down for at least 20 minutes. In France, it's an hour, which is amazing. That there were no varieties of drinks other than milk and water. There was no confectionery anywhere, and in Tasmania we can still offer confectionery in some schools. I know other states and territories have bans on confectionery. What I saw was a skilled workforce who actually enjoyed cooking for children, and we've got that already. It's about paying that skilled workforce appropriately, which I think is a key element. There was a pride in using local and seasonal produce. There was definitely school members and dietitians and chefs involved in menu planning. There was a diverse food selection, culturally and dietary based. the menus and food language was based on the 5 food groups. And I think for me, this is one of the things that stood out, because we tend to in Australia talk about the nutrients. So we talk about the macro and the micronutrients. We talk about low fat, high fibre, etc. But I didn't see that language as the interface with the children. It was about the 5 food groups. And obviously the infrastructure was there for schools to actually provide the lunches, or there were central kitchens that were set up to then support schools in their area. So I suppose what I've done is to get the program started in Tasmania, and it's still now being continued, is that these are the elements. These are the cherries that I picked from different countries, and also where I saw it commonly being used across countries. And we've used this as our basis to get going. This is the food that I saw around these are the 3 of the 7 countries that I went to, and it was just colourful. It was from the 5 food groups. It was well presented. It wasn't always presented this way. Often it was on a plate, but quite often this is, just for you to get an idea of the colours. So what needs to happen for Australian children to be fed well? We do, and Catherine mentioned this about addressing food systems, particularly about food procurement. We're actually working really hard to procure Tasmanian food. We don't have that as 100%, but we're aiming for 75% in that space, because we don't grow things like rice, we don't make pasta, that type of thing. About having a skilled workforce, a united school food policy approach based on sustainable principles, having meals based on nutritional and it being tasty. I think a few times we've gone quite nutritional about what we've been delivering to children, and it hasn't probably had the taste. And I know the chefs would like to add more salt and butter to some of the meals, but we've actually got a really good balance of utilising herbs and spices to develop that taste. It has to be place-based. In Tasmania, each school is actually implementing the school lunch program that best fits their school and their community. We do have 2 delivery models. So one is from a central kitchen, where the main part of the meal is cooked at that central kitchen with Loaves and Fishes Tasmania, and their social enterprise project, which is skilling up young people and long-term unemployed people with a Cert 3 in kitchen management or in warehouse efficiencies, or the ingredients are delivered to the school, and they use the recipe that's used in the central kitchen to actually cook at the school. So that's, again, depending on what skill set is at the school. And we're working at the moment to actually really develop the skill set in schools so that they are cooks or chef trained. And it's amazing how many people are really interested to work in this space. We've learnt that the strong links to curriculum are really beneficial and important, and I think the big aim is to establish the school lunch where everyone sits down and eats together, because that's some of the real benefits that we've seen, and that's been mentioned already, that it's a normal part of the school day, not something that is grabbed 5 minutes at lunchtime so that the children can play, so that food and play are actually both valued as crucial parts of the school day. So just very quickly, it started in 2020 when COVID hit, and we realised we had a heightened need in food insecurity in our state, and we were given a tiny bit of money, $30,000, to do a 20-day study in 3 schools where the children sat down and had a meal cooked from scratch, and it was evaluated. And it was that evaluation that really enabled us to then pitch to the government, as well as what the findings were from the Churchill Fellowship. And in 2021, there were election promises from both parties, and we've worked really hard on that bipartisan and also independent members of our Parliament to have them on board. And obviously the partnership with Loaves and Fishes has been crucial. We would not have been able to start without them. And if we waited for everything to be perfect, we'd still be waiting now. So it's really important sometimes just to take that deep dive, and as stressful as it can be, but it actually does gain benefits when people get used to what they're doing. We then got funding from our Department of Premier and Cabinet for the first 15 schools in 2020, and in 2023 it expanded to 30 schools. And then in 2024 we had a bit of an unstable time with our government, but so there was election promise to expand to 60 schools, and we can now see that we're at that point. We've got 60 schools. We got some funding to do a business case, and that enabled us to show how we would scale up, and the benefits of using local and seasonal partnerships, all of that sort of thing. So you can see how we've had to work along that path to lobby, to secure, to show evidence, etc., of the importance of feeding children well whilst at school. These are our guiding principles, that it has to be equitable and universal, that it's quality food, paddock to plate, that health and wellbeing is front and foremost, but there's engaged learning and community involvement in all that we do. And the reason why we've got those guiding principles is so that, for example, if I was to leave as I have, going to retirement, these principles guide the work no matter who is involved, so that there's no slippage, because I certainly saw slippage in some countries when the budget became was reduced, or there was a different focus for schools, etc. So having guiding principles has been really important in what we've been doing. This is an example of one of our Term 1 menus. So you can see that there's the 5 food groups represented. There's foods that children like, and butter chicken is definitely a popular meal, and the lentil bolognese is also important. So you can see, is popular. So you can see that we're actually also increasing improving the taste buds of children with things, foods like lentils and chickpeas, and they're really actually taking them on board. These are the results: engaged learning, there's calmer students, there's been a reduction in poor behaviour in the afternoon documented by principals. Some principals have added extra lessons after lunch now because the children are more able to concentrate. Children are trying and enjoying new foods, and particularly vegetables. We get lots of calls from parents saying, how are you feeding my fussy child? And children are pointing out vegetables when they go on their shop now, and parents are more confident in buying cauliflower and making cauliflower mac cheese, for example, as following the recipe from school. It does address food insecurity in a universal and community-based approach, so every child is fed, not just some. There is a reduction in consumption of processed and ultra-processed foods because we're cooking from scratch. There's that lovely social connection. We're developing food literacy along the way, and also that improved local economy where we're actually able to pay farmers and producers for their produce for the program, and they're very keen to be involved. These 2 little ones inspire me when I was in the manager's role every day. They love their food. The little boy, for those of you that weren't at the Hobart meeting, he is from a family of it's either 7 or 9, but he is a twin at the end of the line. And so he could not believe that he could have a full plate of food, and he couldn't believe that he could go back for seconds and thirds, because obviously in his family, in the pecking order, he was quite low. So he's always enjoyed school lunch and has always been very, very chuffed in the food that he can consume. So that's my presentation. It's very exciting to be in this space at the moment because that energy that Megan and Jen and Catherine talked about in Hobart was very palpable. We are on something really amazing going forward, and I think that one of the calls for action was around the Australian School Meal Alliance, and there's a lot of work being put into that at the moment, which will be with FOCIS. So we've really got some energy growing in how we can talk with the federal government about having an Australia-wide approach to looking at how we do feed children whilst they're at school. So very exciting.
Thank you so much, Julie. I feel like every time I hear you speak, I write down more notes. So thank you for sharing such an amazing story from Tassie. We have a couple more slides to wrap up. Just share my screen with you. At the summit, there was a real-time survey that people could participate in. So of the 150 delegates, 70 participated, and I just wanted to share a couple of the key findings before I ask you two questions. So it was identified that the top priority issues are food insecurity, poor fruit and vegetable intake, and excessive ultra-processed food consumption. And I think you can see from all of our presentations today that we focused on each of those three key issues. The most impactful interventions are free school lunch programs, nationally healthy canteen guidelines, and free fruit and vegetable programs. And there was a range of people who participated in the event and in this survey. So my questions for you, if you can please use your chat function. Based on today's webinar, would you be interested in participating in future school food webinars that could include different speakers or key topics? If you can just let us know by responding in the chat, yes, no, or maybe. No pressure. It's just other people have already said to me, can I present? And we didn't have time today, but I know that there's so much passion and so many good things that are happening, not just nationally, but certainly here in WA. My second question is FOCIS is currently exploring future activities. And one idea is that if another school food summit was held in 2027, potentially in Perth as a satellite event alongside the PHAA conference, which is what happened in Tassie, would you be interested in attending and or presenting? My answer is yes. I want to attend, I want to present, I want to do all the things and repeat all that passion that we had in the room. I certainly have a fire in my belly, and I want to make sure that we can all participate. So yes, no, maybe, yes to both. And a call to action. I really encourage you to visit the FOCIS website. There are School Food Summit highlights. There's a video as well as a written communique that you can see more information about what we've touched on today. Julie's talked about the Australian School Meal Alliance. So this was launched by FOCIS at the summit. The purpose is to promote national cohesion and equitable access to nutritious meals provided at school, and enable cross-sector collaboration to advocate, connect, and empower the development and implementation of school meal initiatives. You can go onto the website, there's an expression of interest. Maybe you're interested in being part of the alliance, and maybe you're just interested in knowing future updates and being kept in the loop. Either way, there is a sign-up sheet on the FOCIS website. You can use that QR code, and thanks to Amanda, she's added some links into the chat as well. That's it for today. I'm so happy that we were able to get such a large group of stakeholders together. People in WA are really invested in food in schools, and our national colleagues that joined us as well. If you are keen to talk about this further in your own states and territories or run a similar webinar, I'd be really happy to help. Thank you to Jenny, to Catherine and Julie. Your presentations were amazing as always. I wish you all the best for the rest of your day.